ultimately, like, you do hold the keys to their real need. And that's for them to be touched by Christ. And sometimes that comes in just a gentle hand on their shoulder while you listen with a stethoscope. Sometimes that comes in offering a prayer when that is appropriate, right? Sometimes it comes in just taking a couple more minutes to listen about their needs and their problems, even though you're not going to be able to meet them and there's 20 more patients waiting for you.
Welcome back to another episode of On the Ground with Samaritan's Purse, where we take you to the front lines and behind the scenes of our work around the world. I'm your host, Christy Graham, and this week we're taking you to Sudan, where more than 11 million people have been internally displaced as they've fled violence from the ongoing civil war. And amidst this turmoil, many are feeling hopeless. And in one particular city, where the medical infrastructure is overwhelmed by the amount of people, Samaritan's Purse has been able to help by setting up an emergency field hospital. The voice you heard at the beginning of the episode is Shannon Hamilton. She's a physician assistant who served as the team lead for our disaster response team in Sudan. And as you heard Shannon say, there were overwhelming needs in Sudan. And it's a challenge that even before stepping foot in the country, it was hard to get our visas, to get access, but the Lord has provided every step of the way. And we always want to provide good medical care. But ultimately, the goal of why we're there is to share God's love with the people of Sudan. God's everlasting love, as it talks about in Jeremiah 31. Everything in our world is going to pass away, but God's love is everlasting and his kindness is unfailing. I love Psalm 36:7 that says, "How priceless is your unfailing love, O God. People take refuge in the shadow of your wings." These DART members were able to pour out their love because God first loved them. 1 John 3:1 says, "See what kind of love the Father has given to us, that we should be called children of God." They wanted to show each patient that came through that they were loved so much and they could be called a child of God. And I hope that you listening, that you are a child of God, that you know how loved you are by an unfailing, amazing Father, and that you can share that to others. But first, Shannon talks about the favor of God enabling our DART team to be able to serve in Sudan.
It's such a miracle. So as soon as the war broke out a year and a half ago, we started trying to find that access, and the door just kept getting closed. And this wasn't just for us. Every aid organization has had an extreme difficulty getting in. I actually was able to get to Sudan in September. And I remember really specifically how God broke my heart even more than he had previously for just the lostness. There's so much spiritual blindness and darkness there. And there's one particular night I was on the roof of the apartment and just looking out over the city. And you can see the sun kind of blurred by the dust and the fog and the mosque tower sticking up in front of that. And it just seemed like such a picture to me of how God's light was being blinded. People were blinded to that by the idolatry and the false worship they're caught in. The soil in Sudan is just, it's hard, and it takes years of tilling, years of relationship so many times for someone to come to faith. And I just poured my heart out to God. I remember thinking about, Abraham talking about Sodom and Gomorrah and saying, Lord, there must be 10, there must be 5. And I remember thinking that, God, there must be 10 people, there must be 5 people, there must be somebody in Sudan who's seeking you and asking for you to reveal yourself to them. Won't you open the door to bring our teams in? Won't you open the door for more Christians to come? And then just a couple short months later, God just miraculously opened the door, and we got 30 visas to take a team in. Now, that's half of the team we would normally take in to run a hospital like we were running in Sudan. But it was a miracle that we got those visas.
I love that he went before. I mean, he always goes before, but I love that you got to see it, that he broke your heart and you got to be the disaster assistance response team lead to help set up this emergency field hospital. So what was that like, setting up a field hospital? But what was it like to even be lacking?
Yeah, like you said, DARTs are always challenging, right? And God always shows up in incredible ways. So this time we were taking about half of the size of a team we would normally take. There was a lot of other things that were challenging, even just moving equipment around the country. You have to get permission to move from one city to the next. God, I would say, stretched our team, definitely stretched me as a team lead in ways I had never been stretched before. But you just see that how like God's grace is sufficient for me because his power is made perfect in weakness. There was even a time when we were switching over from wave 1 staff to wave 2 staff where some of our team had left and the rest of our team didn't have visas to come back for the second wave. And there were 5 of us there running the hospital for the DART team. And I think back to the situations I had, a woman in labor who we were concerned that she might have uterine rupture. I had a baby with 2-month-old with respiratory distress in our outpatient department and almost no staff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I should have felt such an incredible sense of like chaos and fear and stress. And God's peace was just so present, and how he just worked in each of those situations that not the ideal thing, but what we needed would just come through at just the right moment. Our country office staff that works there full time was like a huge part of helping us work out all the logistics and getting the team in and getting governmental permissions. But for the hospital itself, we needed more than the 30 staff we were able to bring in. So we hired a lot of local staff, worked with the local Ministry of Health to get local Sudanese doctors and nurses and midwives. And that can be hard, right? Because now you're bringing together 2 sets of people from 2 different cultures, 2 different medical trainings, and you're trying to bring them together really quickly to start working cohesively as a team and run a hospital. And that definitely can bring its challenges, but it's also such an opportunity and such a blessing because, a patient, you might see them for a few minutes, a few hours, even a few days. But the staff you're working with day in and day out, and they get to build these incredible relationships with our team. I was so just impressed with our team and how well they loved on them. And those are the things that really open people's hearts and open the door for us to share, because they want to know, they see this difference in us. They see this difference in how we treat our patients and how we love on people, how we treat them as we're working together with them. And it starts to bring questions. People want to know, why are you here? And then we get to tell them why. And from a very practical standpoint as well, we spend that time training them and improving their medical care and educating them and helping them grow. And so you leave something really concrete behind, and now they're able to continue that care after we're gone.
That's incredible. And I'm sure you've seen that time and time again. And like you said, every disaster is different. So tell me about this hospital. Did you know what the emphasis was, or did it change once you got there? What were you helping with? And can you walk us through the wards and what was needed?
This one was really special. Before I got there with the full team, we had an assessment team go in. And so they were going around trying to see exactly like what is that need. And the Ministry of Health took them to the obstetrics hospital. And it was just immediately evident. There were 3 women to most of the beds. So imagine being in labor giving birth, and there's like 3 women in one bed. And they would get like just a few minutes to like be put in a delivery chair when it was time to deliver, and then boom, on to the next woman. They were doing like 2 to 3 times the amount of C-sections as normal because in Gadara, they've had 2 to 3 million internally displaced people come into a city of 500,000. We quickly focused in on that it would be there for obstetrics care and pediatric care.
It's hard to tell until I squeeze it.
In that emergency pregnancy care and a women's ward.
It looks good. The incision looks good.
First of all, we opened on Christmas Day. And it's hard. I'm going to be really honest. It was really hard to like wrap my head around not going home for Christmas. But so quickly you saw like how special it was to just like walk in Jesus' footsteps in that way, right? I mean, he left his home for Christmas. And then the story, right? And I got to share that as well with, these Muslim people that were working with the government. We had an opening ceremony on Christmas Day and getting to share with them like, hey, today we celebrate that there was this woman named Mary who had to travel from her village and leave her home, and she had no safe place to give birth to this rescuer that was coming from God. And so it's really special for us as Christians that today we get to open a hospital to give women a safe place to give birth. And it was just such a neat thing to have this other witnessing opportunity. But anytime we're on these darts, you see, like I said, we're in the middle of chaos. We're in the middle of disaster. We're in the middle of violence. And the field hospital will become this, I really want to say, almost holy ground of like peace in the midst of the storm. And you see God's presence in these dark places. And here it was just in this really special way when you take these women and these children who have been fleeing violence, who are the most vulnerable. Many times their husbands are gone, they have no protector. And now they come to this place for the first time in who knows how long, where they can be safe, they can be secure, someone loves them. And you would just see the peace and the joy that would come over them, and how God is our provider, how God is our father, how all of these things that we could demonstrate to these women and children in such a special way. And I just think about all these babies that were born. We've had over 300, and like, wow, like what a blessing God has put on the beginning of their lives to take them out of the middle of the violence and the war that they were going to be born in, to be born at our field hospital. I mean, I think our first baby was born on Christmas Day, just like hours before midnight. We had that one baby born, and I'm like, wow, like, I think God must have something really special for that little boy.
Can you tell us about these women just culturally? Like, what did you learn from them? I mean, I think there's commonality in the world, but what did you see in their culture different, either motherhood or the way that women are treated?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, Christy. There are, commonalities, right? Like, you think of a mother and the joy when she sees her baby after the pain of labor. Like, we see that over and over again. Women just breaking out in smiles and joy when we hand them their babies, and tears. Those things are just right common across cultures. But Sudan can be a very hard place to be a woman. They, aren't always treated with the dignity and the respect that they deserve. They don't have a lot of say in things like even their own medical care or, birth process or things like that. And so I think that was another thing that made us so different, is when they came to our hospital, we treated them with love and compassion and dignity. We gave them choices. And so many of these women had never experienced anything like that before. And you even heard from our staff over and over again about how clear it was that there was something different about us. They loved working at our hospital, and you would see them start to change as well in the way they treated the women, just in days, honestly, even as they saw the way our staff treated women with kindness and compassion, it would quickly begin to spill over into their care. And, there were things we did, like praying with patients, if they wanted that, whenever we could, but also just praying together. Like before I would round with the doctors in the morning, we would all pray. And pretty soon, some of the Sudanese doctors were joining us for that. And that's pretty incredible to have these devout Muslim doctors stepping up. Like I remember one day we all put our arms around each other as we prayed. And one of the pediatricians came up and put her arm around us and joined the circle to pray with us in Jesus' name.
You've given us kind of an overview picture, but can you take us individually? Can you maybe introduce us to some of the women or some of the people that impacted you?
I can tell you one little girl that her face is just imprinted on my mind. Manira came in with her mother covered in burns just all across her chest and upper body and arm. And those burns were 2 months old. It just broke my heart. They weren't cared for. They were crusted, just to think about how much pain and just how miserable she had been for 2 months. But that little girl was so resilient and so strong. God is so good. We had a surgeon there who knew how to take care of those burns and do grafting. Her right arm was so burned, it was very contracted, like the muscles were all stiffened up and she couldn't move it. But one of our other PAs that was working there had a similar situation with her son and knew like the therapy and things they had done to help get his arm working again. And so we brought her in, we started cleaning up the wounds, got her into the operating room. We didn't have the right tool to do the skin graft she needed, but we were miraculously able to find it like a couple towns away and bring it in and start doing skin grafts. So Manira is actually still at the hospital. So she's been there since, like the end of December.
Wow.
Her mother and her siblings. And so this family has just become part of our family. And you saw Manira come in, this girl who was frightened and in pain, and turn into, you can see pictures of her and she is just beaming with joy. You just think about the impact of someone not just coming in and seeing the love of Jesus for one day, but day after day after day. Like physically, spiritually, mentally, Manira's life is just completely changed by the time that she's spent with us. And I just love to think about what Jesus is going to do with her.
Are you happy?
Happy?
Yeah.
Are you a pretty princess?
Pretty princess?
Yes.
You just heard Manira playing with some of our staff. Now that she was at the emergency field hospital, she's finally getting the care that she desperately has needed. And I love how the Lord orchestrated everything. He went before the team. From enabling the doctors to find the right tools to sending a PA who knew the exact physical therapy that she needed. Now I want you to hear a little bit from Fadima, Munira's mother. One of our podcast correspondents, Grace, she was on the ground in Sudan and she got to talk to her about what it meant to see her daughter healing.
أنا خلاص بقول أسيب البنت دي بتموت حمدت ربي وشكرته والحمد لله.
She said she's happy because all of the staff here just take care of her daughter and help her.
إن شاء الله يا رب إن شاء الله.
Before she received the medical care, she was helpless. She will live. She thought she was dead. But now she hoping that she'll grow up and be a doctor. She will be happy for her.
Now Munira's mother has hope for her daughter's future. But most importantly, the Lord has a plan for her life. Because of him, we have a hope and a future. Sharon, a pediatric nurse, became good friends with Munira.
مناسك أكبر مناسك كبيرة.
Yes, and Yamira.
كبيرة.
Kabira.
After a shift, Grace caught up with Sharon, who shared about the good but also the hard of her role in the EFH.
I work in the peds tent with all the little tiny babies.
Well, you are so good with them. It's so cute, like you were made for this. But how have you felt in this situation, in this very different experience than working in Western healthcare?
Day one was great. Love day one. Then I just realized how hard it is having very little supplies and having very sick babies. And so it's been hard, but very rewarding. And if we weren't here, lots of these babies just wouldn't make it.
That's so heavy.
Yeah, this has been a heavy day. Yeah, we have 4 septic babies in our tent right now. And so 4 babies who, if they wouldn't be treated with their antibiotics, they would have and could have died at home. And so it's been busy and hard, but also knowing that you're making an impact and making it so these little lives hopefully can, become big lives.
How have you been able to hold on to your faith in the midst of some of these hard situations?
Yeah, I think it's really cool starting the day with a devotional with the whole group and being like, okay, this is a whole group of people who really love Jesus, and being able to work with them and pray with them and just know that we all have something, that common ground to fall back on. And then we went for a little prayer walk this morning with a few of the peds nurse in the maternity tent. And we were able to walk and pray and kind of set our minds upon, something that was bigger. One of the girls told me to say, she says one line in her head, Lord, you are my strength, whenever she's overwhelmed. And I've been saying that, and it's been really helping me bring it back. Okay, this is God's people. These are, Jesus loves these people, and his heart breaks for these people more than my heart breaks for them. So, that's what's bringing me back.
Even though our doctors and nurses can't fix every problem, we're thankful that the Lord sees every single child and loves them deeply. He knows the number of their hair on their heads, and he cares for them. And I can happily share that as of a few days ago, our teams rejoiced as Munira was discharged from the hospital after 2 months in our care. She can now return home with her mom and siblings, and we thank God for this. Here's more of my conversation with Shannon. So you said 3 a.m. people are lining up. So tell me about who you saw, how they knew about the hospital. Maybe walk us through a day and kind of the impact that the hospital had on the community.
Yeah, I mean, the need was just incredible. And that's one of the things, it's there's more need than we can meet, honestly. And people would try to start lining up the night before and spend the night there. We would see about 100 patients per day in our outpatient department. And I think, so many people who go into this work, they sometimes don't last, right? Because you see there's so much you can't do. And I can't imagine doing this without having that a viewpoint of eternity, right? Because when we go in, we know, I'm not going to solve the war in Sudan. I'm not going to solve the hunger crisis. But I know a God who one day he will make everything right. One day he will resolve all of this injustice, and that there's this hope for eternity, and I can offer people that. And so, I think that's really what gets you through the day and gets you through seeing these crowds of people that you can't possibly meet their need, is knowing that there's a God who can and a God who cares so deeply about each one of them. I have another patient that really stuck out to me and comes to my mind. We had a young girl. She came in. I mean, it was immediately just so clear to the doctors working in the outpatient department that this was someone who was really sick. We got her admitted to the women's ward. And again, our surgeon just had exactly the right skills, exactly the right knowledge. And so he did some ultrasound, reviewed her medical records, and it turned out she had end-stage ovarian cancer, which is insane for an 18-year-old girl. That doesn't happen at that age. But it had already spread everywhere. It was all through her abdomen, all through her lungs. And we knew, there was nothing left to do. Just getting the family, the mother, to understand that, those are hard conversations to have, to tell someone that they're 18-year-old. There's nothing physical you can do to help them. But God is so good. And just a few days before that, we had hired a translator who, in God's sovereignty, just happened to be a Christian. And, I knew immediately that, God did not bring us this girl who was about to die and face eternity for no reason, right? And so I brought in Osman, our Christian translator, and he immediately started sharing with him how there was a healer named Jesus. And so for the next few days, we just worked on getting her comfortable and hydrated and kind of helping Mom figure out how to take care of her. And they decided they did want to go home with Dad and siblings and be with family her last few days. But during that time, we would pray with her. And there were 2 times that this girl would just light up with a smile. It was when we brought her a cold soda or when we prayed for her in the name of Jesus. And, she left, and I won't forget, our whole team came together. I had the local church pastor came and helped get them a taxi to go to their home village. The local pastor just happened to be from the same village her family was from. God is just so incredible, and was able to go meet her family before she even went back to that village. And we got them some food and some necessities, and got her a dress in her favorite color. So I hope she got to feel beautiful in those last days. And I just remember our team gathering around her to pray and just sharing Jesus with her one last time. And she just left with this peace and this joy that someone who's dying of cancer at 18 shouldn't have. And she died a couple days later, and her dad reached out and just shared how thankful he was for how she was treated and loved and made to feel like family. And I talked with our translator, Osman, who had shared with her, and I said, I hope she was able to understand about Christ and who he is. And he shared with me, he's like, Shannon, the peace and joy that she had when she left is a peace and joy that can only come from Christ. She wasn't really able to talk anymore or verbalize that she had put her faith in Christ. But I firmly believe that she's in heaven and that we'll see her there someday.
Wow. That's why we go. Yes, we want to help them physically. We want to do all that we can. But at some point, there's only so much we can do. And we have to trust the ultimate healer. And the reason we go is because we have a spiritual need. And like you said, to be able to share that in some of their weakest moments is so humbling. And when you're talking about just facing hardship and heartache and seeing it, it changes you. And like you said, we can't bring peace on earth. We can't change a lot of these situations. So we can bring Jesus into the situation. So was there a scripture or a verse that the Lord gave your team or gave you personally to help you get through seeing such heartache?
Yeah. On this one, I'll tell you, I felt my need for Jesus every day. Man, my human abilities as a leader, as a PA, were really stretched. And man, you have to depend on the Lord. And I even, shared with some family and friends one day the prayer request of just man, we need your prayer, the spiritual darkness. You could just feel the spiritual warfare. And I came back to a verse I come back to a lot in 2 Corinthians 4, and it talks about we've received this ministry and this mercy, and so we don't lose heart. And it goes on in verse 3 to talk about how if our gospel is veiled, it's veiled to those who are perishing, in whose case the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelieving so they might not see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ. And you see that, right? I talked about that, how you just see the darkness is palpable. But he talks about the God who said, light shall shine out of darkness is the one who is shown in our hearts. And so I just remember that, this is the God who created light. This is the God who just spoke light into being. And then right at the end of that chapter, it talks about how we're afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not despairing, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always caring about in the body the dying of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus also may be manifested. And so just remembering that in the middle of those hard moments, God will not allow us to be crushed, but the difficult things that we're doing are the very things that allow Jesus to shine through our lives. And that's, that is what he asks of us, is to step into these hard places and suffer with others on his behalf. And in this life, that is so often how his light shines the brightest. And so, man, yeah, let's step into the dark places. Let's step into the hard things. It's so worth it when you see the way God comes through in the middle of that.
I love this verse that Shannon read. And it's true that we aren't promised an easy life here, but the Lord is with us in the middle of the trial, and he never leaves. And I love Shannon's challenge to us at the end to step into hard places where God is calling us. Wherever God's calling you, you can trust him with what he's calling you to do. Please join me in praying for Sudan in the darkness that Shannon talked about. Pray for our doctors and our nurses that are serving there and the local staff that are working alongside them. Pray that God's light will shine through them. Thank you for joining us. I hope you have a great week.